Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today I want to talk about skill-based matchmaking and its place in both casual and competitive games. This has become such a hot topic these days with so many different arguments both for and against it. And really there's a lot of nuance that gets lost in these arguments, and I wanted to take a further, more analytical look into the logic and ideas behind both sides to see if we can make some more conclusive statements about the situation. Now, first off, for anyone new to the subject matter, well, what is skill-based matchmaking? Well, skill-based matchmaking, or sometimes referred to as score-based matchmaking, is an automated system used in multiplayer games that assigns players a skill level or ranking value. It then uses that value to loosely determine what players you'll play with and against in public matchmaking. Now, of course, other non-skill based factors will affect your matchmaking, such as ping to the server, region, connection quality, and more. This is not necessarily part of a skill-based matchmaking system, but a skill-based matchmaking system can be applied on top of this system to further regulate the general quality of matches, and it's also been proven to be abusable. Reverse boosting or purposefully tanking your stats by dying a lot and playing poorly in matches will get you placed into lower skill lobbies. This has been tested numerous times and is a legitimate way to manipulate the skill-based matchmaking system to get easier lobbies. Now, I want to give both the pros and cons of skill-based matchmaking a fair shake. Let's start off by talking about why people don't like it. Many of the complaints against it are as follows. It can ruin the casual matchmaking experience and creates an overly sweaty environment where players of all skill levels never get a reprieve. It can further encourage a rigid gameplay meta that favors the most lethal weapons and loadouts at the expense of getting to experiment with other more fun loadouts. It can also feel like the game is manipulating you into winning or losing a given match to make the game seem more entertaining. And finally, it can take some of the randomized fun or variety out of games that used to be known for how fun randomly matched lobbies could be. Now, certainly a lot of these complaints are closely related to one another. Ultimately, though, you could summarize a lot of it by saying, well, it's just not that fun to be forced to always have to play at the top of your game, always focus in and try hard just to have a decent experience. Sometimes you might want to sit back, relax, play a bit more casually, use some goofier loadouts, or try something that might not be the best way to play but seems like a fun idea. And that often isn't possible when you're playing in a game with a more rigid skill-based matchmaking system. Now, going over the arguments for skill-based matchmaking, funny enough, a lot of the reasons are pretty much the same. The more randomized nature of, say, older Call of Duty games can be very frustrating for players at all skill levels, not just people at the extremes. One match you could be doing incredibly well, getting tons of kill streaks, winning by a huge margin, you know, the typical pub stomp, but then the next match you could be going up against absolute gods that just annihilate you at every turn. Matches in between those two extremes were much more rare, so you were playing uneven matches more often than not. Skill-based matchmaking evens things out. It ensures that matches, to at least a minor extent, will be much closer. You'll see a lot less blowouts and many more games that really come down to the wire. The idea is that the more even the match is, the more valuable each player's contribution to the outcome is. So while skill-based matchmaking is in play, you can feel like a much more equal member of your team rather than a noob getting overshadowed by all the other better players, or an elite player having to carry a bunch of noobs throughout the match. And so while we can see good arguments both for and against skill-based matchmaking, it does appear that it's becoming more and more popular among developers within casual to casual competitive games. Skill-based matchmaking feels fairer and gives the games a little bit more integrity. You can be confident that if you're a good adaptive player that you will continue to grow, your skills improve, and you will be pushed into higher and higher tiers of skill that'll allow you to become an even better player. Alternatively though, it could be frustrating for players that hit the plateau of their skill curve or don't understand how to improve their gameplay. But overall, many developers have stated publicly that they do see an improvement to player retention across the board when using skill-based matchmaking, so they intend to keep using it. And on top of improved player retention, skill-based matchmaking gives the devs the ability to tune behavior curves that ensure players keep coming back. A study by EA a few years ago concluded that if players are always always winning or always losing, they actually get bored or frustrated with the game sooner. If you manipulate the matchmaking to ensure that players both win and lose in certain patterns, such as win-loss, win-win, loss-loss, they tend to stick around and play for longer periods of time. And while you could argue that there are all sorts of issues with the game itself manipulating the outcome of matches in a deliberate way, it does make sense why overall this seems to be a more fun or enjoyable experience for the masses. Everybody gets to win a little, everybody gets to lose a little, and you feel like you're an important player no matter where your skill level is at. Now, of course, we could rely on the data that's just given to us by developers, but personally, I like to get my own experiences playing between the different games to see how it actually changes my enjoyment of them overall. So I started off by playing some Call of Duty 4 on PC and Modern Warfare, as well as Squad and a few other games. I was keeping an eye out for how easy the matches felt, if I won or lost by a landslide, and generally how casual or fun the matches seemed to be versus how sweaty. My experience with Call of Duty 4 was that familiar, totally random, pub stomping vibe that you would get from the older COD games. I could go on massive kill streaks, but also get wrecked by a handful of players in each match. In general, every match had a few people at the top of the leaderboards that were totally outperforming everybody else. And I think that is the Call of Duty experience that many veteran players remember, whether that's fondly or negatively. Now, this was contrasted pretty significantly when switching over to Modern Warfare. Every match really felt more like a tug of war. Sometimes I would do well, other times I would do worse, but most of the time I would get 3 to 4 kills and then die by somebody that looked about evenly matched to me. Excluding all the other massive differences in gameplay and level design between Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare, it's obvious that the quality of players I was matched against was very different. Naturally, there's a few other factors to consider, like newer COD games attract the sweatier players, but the difference in experience regardless of the systems behind them was still very substantial. Now, switching over to Squad, a game with no skill-based matchmaking, really revealed how game design can take your mind away from a matchmaking system altogether. In Squad, team play is basically the #1 priority. It's a milsim game, so most players approach it with at least a semi-serious attitude. If your squad leader says go somewhere and build a fob, you do it because that's what the game is designed around. Overall, the team play in Squad is a much more present element of a match. Even if the individual players you're playing with aren't amazing FPS players, they can still play an important role in any game. Also, winning or losing seemed like a smaller element of the gameplay overall, rather than just completing the micro objectives like building a fob or attacking a specific point. You might win your fight, but lose the overall match and still come away feeling good about what you did. Or even take joy in the sheer realism of getting destroyed in terrifying firefights. Squad is a great example of showing how game design and player culture may negate the need to even have a conventional skill-based matchmaking system altogether. Now, what has really heightened the debate around skill-based matchmaking is the ever-popular Battle Royale modes that are popping up in just about every modern shooter. Battle Royale games, by their very nature, is to function like a skill funnel. As a Battle Royale match progresses, it gets less and less likely that an unskilled player is surviving toward the end game. So by the middle or end of the match, the only people left are players that are good at the game. Usually. Obviously, there are exceptions to this rule. So why would developers still employ a type of skill-based matchmaking if the whole game is actually designed to do it naturally? Well, some battle royales still do employ a skill-based matchmaking system, and the driving reason behind it is still player retention. Allowing more players to have a higher chance of surviving into the mid or end game will leave them feeling better than if they were getting absolutely destroyed in the first 30 seconds of the match. Now, the thing I can't ignore is that player retention seems to be the most important thing in keeping your game service alive. And if skill-based matchmaking plays such an important role here, are we going to see it as an inevitable evolution of most modern competitive gaming? Now, personally, I've always gravitated towards the sandbox shooters like PUBG or Battlefield that aren't as hyper-focused on winning, but instead just kind of having fun in the environment. And even so, I have to admit that these games often left me feeling extremely frustrated by unfair situations. While at the same time, I've still had some of my most memorable experiences with these games because of that crazy variety and unpredictability of less regulated gameplay. I think the root of the perceived problem might just be this. Do you prefer a more diverse experience where anything can happen, including you getting your ass kicked in an unfair situation? Or do you want something that feels like you're getting a fair and more or less predictable experience most of the time? I think a lot of current developers are trying to strike a happy balance between the two, but I also think that they will follow the data. If more people play for longer in games that really micromanage your skills, well, then that might become the design format that works. It's not to say that there won't be outliers to this rule, but playing things out long term, the bigger games will probably benefit by catering the experience to every level of skill instead of mixing it all together. Perhaps the people like me who tend to prefer the more Wild West, less regulated approach to multiplayer gaming will become a smaller and smaller voice. Veteran players may look back fondly at the experiences that were more common or more regular before we started using algorithms to regulate our gameplay. Now, I certainly don't think this situation is quite as dark or drastic or dire as some people might want you to think, but it is interesting seeing the most popular games in the world quickly shifting over from what were less regulated sandbox experiences to much more skill-crafted experiences. Talking about how computer algorithms are constantly competing for human attention these days is a very hot topic, and it is interesting to think that this same concept is being applied into video games and has been for a long time, but is now doing so in new ways that we may have never anticipated. The very nature of competition and the idea of trying to get players to play your game for longer periods of time over your competitors' games may require that we all employ, or developers all employ, a skill-based matchmaking system, whether or not they want it. I would certainly love to be able to pop ahead 5 or 10 years just to survey the gaming landscape and seeing how things have changed. What do you guys think? Do you think skill-based matchmaking is the way of the future? Do you think we're going to have a good, healthy mixture of both types of games going down the road? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you prefer in your multiplayer games. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future, and I'll see you guys next time. This is LevelCap signing off.